The marble floors of Bellas Artes concert hall gleamed under the dim night lights as Rosa Mendez pushed her cleaning cart through the empty corridor. At 19, she had already worked here for 2 years, ever since her family had moved from their small village to Mexico City in search of better opportunities. The night shift suited her. Fewer people around meant she could work in peace, and sometimes, just sometimes, she could steal a few precious moments with the crown jewel of the concert hall. The massive wooden doors to the main hall creaked slightly as Rosa pushed them open. Inside, the space was magnificent even in near darkness, with only the safety lights casting long shadows across the rows of empty seats. But Rosa's eyes, as always, went straight to the gleaming black grand piano that sat center stage. She parked her cart by the door and began her usual cleaning routine. Working efficiently, her movements practiced and quick. Every few minutes, her gaze would drift back to the piano. It called to her, as it always did. Just once, she whispered to herself in Spanish, glancing at her watch. It was just past midnight. The security guard, Mr. Ortiz, wouldn't make his rounds for another 40 minutes. She had time. Rosa set down her mop and walked slowly toward the stage. The closer she got, the faster her heart beat in her chest. She climbed the small set of stairs at the side of the stage. Her cleaning uniform, a simple gray dress with the concert hall's emblem, swishing softly with each step. The piano bench was cool beneath her as she sat down and lifted the cover from the keys. Rosa closed her eyes and let her fingers hover over the ivory, a ritual she had performed dozens of times before. She never touched the keys immediately. First, she needed to feel the music building inside her. When her fingers finally descended, they moved with a grace and confidence that transformed the cleaning woman into something else entirely. The notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the empty concert hall. She played from memory, having taught herself by watching performances during her shifts and practicing on an old keyboard that had been donated to her school years ago. Rosa's playing wasn't technically perfect. Some transitions were rough and occasionally her timing faltered. But there was something else in her music, something that couldn't be taught in the finest conservatories, raw emotion that seemed to pour directly from her soul through her fingertips. As she played, the weight of the day slipped away. She forgot about her aching feet, about her mother's cough that wouldn't go away, about her younger siblings who needed new shoes for school. Here, in this moment, she was free. Rosa didn't hear the back door of the concert hall open. She didn't notice the tall figure who stood frozen in the shadows listening. Maestro Victor Kaplan had returned to retrieve the score he'd left behind after rehearsal. The renowned conductor had taken over the National Symphony Orchestra just 3 months ago, and his demanding methods had already driven 2 musicians to quit. His reputation preceded him, brilliant but ruthless, with an ear that could detect the slightest imperfection in a performance. Kaplan had been about to call out, to demand who was playing his orchestra's piano without permission, when the music stopped him cold. The playing was unpolished, yes, but there was something in it that made the hair on his arms stand up, something he hadn't heard in years of conducting professional musicians. Rosa finished the piece and sat in silence for a moment, her eyes still closed, savoring the feeling. Then she played a few notes of a melody she had been working on herself, something that had been floating in her head for weeks. It was simple but haunting, a tune that seemed to speak of longing and hope intertwined. "Who taught you to play like that?" The voice cut through the silence like a knife. Rosa jumped up from the bench, nearly knocking it over in her haste. Standing at the edge of the stage was Maestro Kaplan, his silver hair gleaming in the dim light, his sharp eyes fixed on her. "I'm sorry," Rosa stammered, her accent thickening with fear. I shouldn't have. I'll go back to cleaning right away." Kaplan raised a hand to stop her retreat. "That wasn't my question. Who taught you?" Rosa looked down at her worn shoes. "Nobody, sir. I taught myself." Kaplan's eyebrows shot up in disbelief. "Impossible. I watch the pianists when they practice, and I had a keyboard when I was younger." Rosa was already reaching for the cloth she used to wipe down the piano after performances, desperate to erase any evidence of her transgression. "Play something else," Kaplan commanded. Rosa froze. "Sir? You heard me. Play something else, anything." Trembling slightly, Rosa sat back down at the piano. Her mind raced through the pieces she knew. She settled on a Bach prelude, one she had heard the orchestra's pianist practicing last week. Her fingers were stiff with nervousness at first, but as the music took over, She forgot about the intimidating man watching her. Kaplan moved closer, his critical ear catching every mistake, every hesitation. But he also heard something that both confused and intrigued him. The young woman had no formal training. That much was obvious. Her fingering was all wrong. Her posture would make any piano teacher cringe. And yet, when Rosa finished, she kept her eyes on the keys, waiting for her punishment. "What's your name?" Kaplan asked. "Rosa Mendez, sir." "How long have you worked here, Rosa Mendez?" "2 years, sir." "And how long have you been sneaking in to play the piano?" Rosa's cheeks burned with shame. "About a year, sir, but I'm always very careful. I never hurt the piano. I make sure my hands are clean and I always—" "Do you know who I am?" Kaplan interrupted. Rosa nodded. Everyone who worked at Bellas Artes knew of the famous conductor who had recently taken over the orchestra. The musician spoke of him in hushed tones, equal parts respect and fear. "Come to my office tomorrow morning at 9, he said. Rosa's heart sank. This was it. She was going to lose her job. How would she tell her parents? Her father had pulled strings to get her this position. The cleaning work didn't pay much, but it was steady, and they relied on her income. "I'll be there, sir," she said quietly, rising from the bench and carefully closing the piano lid. Kaplan watched her gather her cleaning supplies, a plan already forming in his mind. In 6 weeks, the orchestra would perform at the International Music Festival, an event that attracted critics and music lovers from around the world. It was his first major showcase since taking over the National Symphony. "Leave the rest for tonight," he said abruptly. "Go home and get some sleep." Rosa looked up in surprise. "But sir, I have to finish the main hall and—" "That wasn't a suggestion," Kaplan said, his tone brooking no argument. Rosa nodded and pushed her cart toward the exit, her mind swirling with questions and dread. At the door, she paused and looked back. Kaplan was standing by the piano, one hand resting on its shiny surface, staring into space as if seeing something that wasn't there. Outside, the night air was cool against Rosa's flushed face. The streets of Mexico City were never truly quiet, but at this hour the usual chaos had settled into a gentle hum. She walked quickly toward the bus stop, her thoughts in turmoil. What would her family do if she lost this job? Why did the conductor want to see her tomorrow? Would he tell her boss about what she had done? The questions chased each other around her mind as she climbed onto the nearly empty bus that would take her to the outskirts of the city, where her family lived in a small 2-bedroom apartment. Her father worked construction when he could find it, and her mother cleaned houses in the wealthy neighborhoods. Between the three of them, they managed to keep her 3 younger siblings in school. As the bus rumbled through the darkened streets, Rosa leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. Despite her worry, the memory of the music still lingered in her fingertips. In her mind, she could still hear the rich tones of the grand piano, so different from the tinny sound of the old keyboard she had practiced on until it finally broke last year. Perhaps, she thought as sleep began to claim her, she could ask Maestro Kaplan if she might be allowed to use the piano sometimes when the hall was empty. If she promised to be even more careful, if she agreed to clean extra areas. The thought followed her into her dreams, where she played on a stage filled with light, and the audience, including her family, rose to their feet in applause. Morning came too quickly. Rosa had barely slept, alternating between hope and despair. She dressed carefully in her cleanest clothes, a simple blue blouse and dark skirt that she saved for special occasions. Her mother watched her with concerned eyes as she braided her long black hair. "Are you sure you don't want me to come with you?" she asked in Spanish. Rosa had told her family about the encounter the night before, though she had downplayed the seriousness of the situation. "I'll be fine, Mama," Rosa assured her with a confidence she didn't feel. "I'll call you as soon as I'm done." The journey to Bellas Artes seemed shorter than usual. Each stop of the bus brought her closer to what she was sure would be the end of her time at the concert hall. By the time she climbed the steps of the grand building, her stomach was in knots. The morning staff looked at her curiously as she made her way through the lobby. Rosa was normally only seen in the evenings dressed in her gray uniform. Now in her regular clothes and at this unusual hour, she felt out of place. She found Maestro Kaplan's office easily enough. Everyone knew where the conductor's domain was, though few were invited inside. Rosa stood outside the door, gathering her courage. Then, taking a deep breath, she knocked. Rosa's hand trembled slightly as she knocked on Maestro Kaplan's office door. A gruff "come in" answered her, and she pushed the heavy door open with a mixture of dread and resignation. The office was smaller than she had imagined, with walls lined with bookshelves stuffed with musical scores. A large desk dominated the center of the room, covered with papers, coffee cups, and a metronome. Behind it sat Maestro Kaplan, his silver hair sticking up as if he'd been running his hands through it. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him without looking up from the score he was marking. Rosa perched on the edge of the seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, Kaplan set down his pencil and looked at her. His piercing blue eyes seemed to see right through her. "You play like you've never been taught a single rule," he said bluntly. "Your technique is atrocious. Your timing is inconsistent. Your posture would make any piano teacher weep." Rosa's chest tightened. She had expected to be fired, not insulted. She stared at the floor, wishing she could disappear. "And yet," Kaplan continued, his voice softening slightly, "there is something in your playing that cannot be taught. A raw emotion. A natural musicality that most trained pianists would kill for." Rosa looked up, unsure if she had heard him correctly. Kaplan leaned forward. "How often do you play the piano here?" "2 or 3 times a week," she admitted. "Only when everyone is gone. And I'm always careful." Kaplan waved away her explanation. "And before you worked here?" "You mentioned a keyboard. It was old. From my school. The music teacher let me take it home when they got new ones. But it broke last year." Kaplan nodded as if confirming something to himself. He stood up abruptly and walked to the window, looking out at the busy street below. "The International Music Festival is in 12 weeks, he said. "The National Symphony is featuring Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2. Rosa wasn't sure why he was telling her this. Everyone at Bellas Artes knew about the festival. It was the biggest event of the year. "Our soloist is Gabriel Ochoa. He's technically brilliant," Kaplan continued, turning to face her. "But he plays like a machine, no heart, no soul." He walked back to his desk and sat down, fixing Rosa with an intense stare. "I want to make you a proposition, Rosa Mendez." Rosa's breath caught in her throat. "I will give you proper training. 3 hours every day. You will learn to play correctly, to read music fluently, to understand theory. And in 12 weeks you will perform at the festival." Rosa's mouth fell open. "What?" she gasped. "But that's impossible. I can't, I don't." "You can and you will," Kaplan said firmly. "I've been conducting orchestras for 30 years. I know talent when I hear it. But what about Gabriel Ochoa?" Rosa asked, her mind whirling. "Gabriel will still perform, but there will be a special addition to the program." "A surprise." Rosa shook her head in disbelief. "Maestro, I'm a cleaning woman. I can't perform at an international festival. People train their whole lives for such opportunities." "Yes, and most of them end up playing perfectly and feeling nothing," Kaplan said dismissively. "You feel everything and play terribly. I can fix the latter. No one can teach the former." He pulled a sheet of paper toward him and began writing. "Here is what I propose. You will continue your cleaning job, but with a modified schedule. You will come here every day at 2 o'clock for lessons. We will work until 5. Then you will practice alone until your shift begins at 8. "But my family depends on my income," Rosa protested. "I can't cut my hours." Kaplan looked up. "Your pay will remain the same. I will speak to your supervisor." Rosa felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. "Why would you do this for me?" Kaplan's expression was unreadable. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for the music." He pushed the paper across the desk. "These are the terms. Take it home. Think about it. If you agree, sign it and bring it back tomorrow." Rosa took the paper with numb fingers. "And if I don't agree? Then you continue cleaning floors and I pretend I never heard you play." His tone made it clear the discussion was over. Rosa stood up, clutching the paper. "Thank you for not firing me," she said softly. A hint of a smile flickered across Kaplan's stern face. "Don't thank me yet. If you accept, the next 12 weeks will be the hardest of your life." Rosa nodded and turned to leave. "One more thing," Kaplan called after her. She paused at the door. "Don't tell anyone about our arrangement." "Not yet." Outside, Rosa leaned against the wall of the building, trying to make sense of what had just happened. She unfolded the paper and read it carefully. The terms were exactly as Kaplan had stated. At the bottom was a line for her signature. The bus ride home was a blur. Rosa's thoughts raced. Could she really learn to play properly in just 12 weeks? Was Maestro Kaplan serious about her performing at the festival? What would her family say? Her family. The thought brought her back to reality. How would she explain the change in her schedule? She couldn't tell them the truth, not yet. They would think she was crazy to believe a famous conductor would take interest in a cleaning woman with no formal training. By the time she reached home, Rosa had made up her mind. She would tell her parents she had been offered additional responsibilities at work, which required training during the day. It wasn't exactly a lie. Her mother was hanging laundry in the small courtyard they shared with 3 other families when Rosa arrived. "How did it go?" she asked anxiously, studying her daughter's face. "Did you lose your job?" "No, Mama," Rosa reassured her. "Actually, they've offered me a kind of snow promotion," as Rosa explained the new arrangement. Careful to leave out any mention of pianos or music, festivals. Her mother's worried expression changed to one of cautious pride. "Your father will be pleased," she said, patting Rosa's cheek. "He always said you were meant for better things than cleaning." Rosa felt a twinge of guilt at the deception but pushed it aside. If this somehow worked out, if she could actually learn enough to perform without embarrassing herself, then her family would understand why she had kept it secret. That night, she signed the paper. The next day, when Rosa handed the signed agreement to Maestro Kaplan, he nodded once and immediately led her to the practice room at the back of the concert hall. Unlike the grand piano on stage, this room contained an upright piano, well used but carefully maintained. "Sit," Kaplan instructed, pointing to the bench. Rosa sat down, her back straight, her hands resting in her lap as she had seen the professional pianists do. "No, no, no," Kaplan said irritably. "Your posture is all wrong." He adjusted her shoulders, her arms, the angle of her wrists. "Your hands are your instruments. You must treat them with respect." For the next 3 hours, Kaplan didn't let Rosa play a single note. Instead, he drilled her on proper posture, hand position, and the basics of reading music. By the end, her head was spinning with terms like middle C and treble clef. "Practice these finger exercises until your shift begins," Kaplan said, demonstrating a simple 5-note pattern. "Tomorrow we start scales." As the days turned into weeks, Rosa's life fell into a grueling new routine. She would help her mother with household chores in the morning, then take the bus to Bellas Artes for her lessons with Kaplan. After 3 hours of his demanding instruction, during which he rarely offered praise and frequently expressed exasperation, she would practice alone until her cleaning shift began. Kaplan was a harsh teacher. He would rap her knuckles with a pencil when her fingers curved incorrectly. He would shout when she played a wrong note. Once, he made her repeat the same measure 20 times until she got it right. But Rosa could see the progress she was making. Her fingers moved more confidently across the keys. She could read simple sheet music without hesitation. Her playing was becoming more precise, more controlled. 4 weeks into their arrangement, Kaplan finally showed her the piece she would perform, a simplified arrangement of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, adapted to showcase her strengths and minimize her weaknesses. "This is what you will play at the festival," he said, placing the music in front of her. "The orchestra will accompany you for the first part. Then they will stop, and you will play the solo section alone." Rosa stared at the complex notation, her heart sinking. "I can't possibly learn this in 8 weeks. 7, Kaplan corrected. "The final week is for rehearsals with the orchestra." "Maestro, be reasonable," Rosa pleaded. "I've only been reading music for a month." Kaplan's expression softened slightly. "Play what you can," he said. "Just the first page." With trembling hands, Rosa began to play. The music was challenging, but as she worked through it note by note, she found that it spoke to something deep inside her. The melancholy of the piece, the way it built from darkness toward hope, resonated with her own life's journey. When she finished the page, she looked up to find Kaplan watching her with an odd expression, part satisfaction, part wonder. "Again," he said quietly, "but this time don't just play the notes. Feel them." By the 6th week, rumors had begun to spread through the concert hall. The cleaning staff noticed Rosa's special treatment, the way Kaplan would nod to her in the corridors, the hours she spent in the practice room. The musicians whispered about hearing someone playing late at night, someone with unusual style but undeniable passion. Gabriel Ochoa, the orchestra's principal pianist who was set to be the festival soloist, cornered Rosa one evening as she was beginning her shift. "So you're Kaplan's new project," he said, his handsome face tight with suspicion. "What exactly is he teaching you in there every day?" Rosa clutched her mop, unsure how to respond. Kaplan had been clear about keeping their arrangement secret. "Just some extra cleaning techniques," she mumbled, trying to move past him. Gabriel blocked her path. "Don't play dumb with me. I've heard you play. We all have. What game is Kaplan playing?" Before Rosa could answer, a sharp voice cut through the tension. "Ochoa, aren't you supposed to be practicing the second movement? It was sloppy at rehearsal today." Kaplan stood in the doorway, his eyes cold. Gabriel straightened, his expression smoothing into professional deference. "Of course, maestro. I was just leaving." As he walked away, he gave Rosa a look that made her shiver. This wasn't over. "Ignore him," Kaplan said when Gabriel was out of earshot. "Jealousy is an ugly thing. Now, have you been practicing the cadenza like I showed you?" Rosa nodded, but her enthusiasm had dimmed. For the first time, she wondered if she was in over her head. The festival was only 6 weeks away, and she was still struggling with parts of the piece. Moreover, it was becoming clear that her presence was causing tension among the professional musicians. "I don't belong here," she said quietly. Kaplan studied her for a long moment. "Perhaps not yet," he finally replied. "But you will. Now get back to work, both kinds." As Rosa mopped the corridor, she wondered what she had gotten herself into, and whether she had the strength to see it through. By the 8th week of her training, Rosa's hands had changed. Her once soft fingers were now calloused, the nails cut short. She had developed muscles in her forearms that hadn't been there before. Sometimes, lying in bed at night, she would flex her fingers and marvel at how different they felt. Stronger, more precise, as if they had their own intelligence now. But it wasn't just her hands that had changed. Her entire life had been turned upside down by Maestro Kaplan's impossible challenge. Rosa arrived at the practice room one afternoon to find Kaplan already seated at the piano, playing through her solo piece with effortless skill. She stood in the doorway, watching his fingers dance across the keys, creating sounds so beautiful they made her throat tighten. He stopped abruptly when he noticed her. "You're late." "The bus was delayed," Rosa explained, setting down her bag. "There was an accident on—" "The music doesn't care about bus schedules," Kaplan interrupted. 4 weeks until the festival. "We can't afford delays," Rosa bit back a retort. She was exhausted. She had been up until 3 a.m., practicing after her cleaning shift, only to wake at 7 to help her mother with her younger siblings. The constant pressure was wearing her down, and Kaplan's demanding nature wasn't helping. "Play the third movement," he instructed. Moving from the bench, Rosa sat down, positioned her hands, and began to play. The music flowed from her fingers more naturally now. Weeks of practice had embedded the notes into her muscle memory. But halfway through she faltered, hitting a wrong chord. "Stop, stop, stop." Kaplan slapped his hand on the piano lid. "What was that?" "We've been over this passage 100 times. I'm tired," Rosa said, her voice small. "Tired?" Kaplan's eyebrows shot up. "You think tired is an excuse? The audience won't care if you're tired. The critics won't write, 'She played poorly, but she was tired, so we'll give her another chance.' I know, but no buts." Kaplan's face was flushed with anger. "Either you want this or you don't. If you don't, tell me now so I can stop wasting my time." Something inside Rosa snapped. "Wasting your time? What about my time? I work all day, practice all evening, clean all night, help my family every morning. I haven't had a full night's sleep in 2 months. You don't understand what this is costing me." The words hung in the air between them. Rosa had never raised her voice to the maestro before. She half expected him to throw her out. Instead, Kaplan's expression softened slightly. He pulled a chair close to the piano bench and sat down. "Tell me," he said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. So Rosa told him about her father's back injury that had left him unable to work consistently, about her mother's second job cleaning houses in the wealthy neighborhoods, about her 3 younger siblings who needed school supplies and new clothes, about the leaking roof in their small apartment that the landlord refused to fix. "The money from this job keeps us afloat," she finished. "But it's not just that. My family believes I've been given extra responsibilities here. A kind of promotion. They're so proud. I can't tell them I'm spending my days learning to play piano for a performance that might be a complete disaster." Kaplan was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled under his chin. "Your playing doesn't sound like a disaster to me," he finally said. Rosa looked up in surprise. It was the closest thing to a compliment he had ever given her. "But it's not good enough, is it?" she asked. "Not yet," Kaplan admitted, "but it will be." He stood up and walked to the window. "Take today off. Go home, sleep, come back tomorrow refreshed." Rosa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Really?" "Yes, but first play the passage once more. The one you messed up." Rosa turned back to the piano and played the troublesome section. This time her fingers found the right notes. "Good," Kaplan nodded. "Tomorrow we'll work on the emotional texture of the piece. You have the notes. Now we need to find the soul." As Rosa walked home that afternoon, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. The unexpected kindness from Kaplan had renewed her determination. She had come too far to give up now. The next day, Rosa arrived at the practice room to find it occupied. Gabriel Ochoa was playing through his concerto, his technique flawless as always. He stopped when he saw her. "Ah, the prodigy arrives," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Kaplan's little experiment." Rosa stood her ground. "I'm just here for my lesson." Gabriel rose from the bench with exaggerated politeness. "By all means. The maestro's pet must have her practice time." As he brushed past her, he added in a low voice, "You know he's using you, right? This is just another of his provocations. He loves to stir up controversy before a big performance." Before Rosa could respond, Kaplan entered the room. "Ochoa, don't you have somewhere to be?" Gabriel nodded stiffly and left without another word. "Ignore him," Kaplan said, setting down his briefcase. "His ego is bruised." "He said you're using me," Rosa said quietly. "That I'm just a provocation." Kaplan's face darkened. "Ochoa talks too much." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a CD. "I brought something for you to listen to. The great Rubinstein playing Rachmaninoff. Not for you to copy, but to inspire." He put the CD in the small player in the corner of the room, and the rich, emotional playing filled the space. Rosa closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. "That's what we're working toward," Kaplan said when the piece ended. "Not just playing the notes, but making them speak." For the next week, their lessons changed. Instead of focusing solely on technique, Kaplan talked to Rosa about the emotions behind the music the story had told. "Rachmaninoff wrote this after recovering from a deep depression," he explained. "It's a journey from darkness to light. When you play, think about your own journey, your struggles, your hopes." Rosa found that this approach transformed her playing. When she thought about her family's hardships, their resilience, their love for each other, the music took on new depth and meaning. 10 days before the festival, Kaplan brought her to the main stage for the first time. The grand piano there was larger than the upright she had been practicing on, the keys slightly heavier. "Play through the solo section," Kaplan instructed, taking a seat in the empty auditorium. Rosa's heart pounded as she positioned herself at the magnificent instrument. This was where she would perform in front of hundreds of people, critics, musicians, music lovers from around the world. The thought made her hands shake. She began to play tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as she felt the piano respond to her touch. The acoustics in the hall were perfect, carrying the sound to every corner. When she finished, she looked out to where Kaplan sat. He was perfectly still, his expression unreadable. "Again," he said, "but this time forget I'm here. Forget about the festival. Play for yourself." Rosa took a deep breath and began again. This time she closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her, thinking of her journey from the village to the city, from cleaning floors to sitting at this magnificent piano. She thought of her family's sacrifices, of Kaplan's demanding but ultimately supportive teaching, of her own determination. When the final notes faded away, she opened her eyes to find Kaplan standing, a strange look on his face. "That," he said quietly, "is why we're doing this." The next day, Rosa arrived at Bellas Artes to find the entire orchestra assembled on stage for rehearsal. Kaplan had warned her this would happen, but seeing all those professional musicians, some of whom had been playing since before she was born, made her stomach knot with anxiety. "Everyone," Kaplan announced, "this is Rosa Mendez. She will be performing a special solo after Gabriel's concerto at the festival." The musicians looked at her with varying expressions, curiosity, skepticism, a few with outright hostility. Gabriel, seated at the main piano, gave her a cold stare. Rosa will play through her piece now, and then we'll work on the orchestral accompaniment, Kaplan continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Rosa walked to the second piano that had been placed on stage, feeling as if her legs might give way. She sat down, trying to control her breathing as Kaplan had taught her. The first few notes came out shaky, but as she continued to play, the familiar music steadied her. She lost herself in the piece, barely aware of the orchestra watching. When she finished, there was silence. Then, from the back of the stage, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound growing until most of the orchestra was clapping, with notable exceptions, including Gabriel. "All right, enough," Kaplan said, though Rosa could see a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. From the beginning, with orchestral accompaniment, the rehearsal was challenging. Playing with an orchestra was different from playing alone, requiring Rosa to adjust her timing and expression to match the collective sound. Kaplan stopped them frequently, making adjustments, sometimes praising, sometimes criticizing. By the end of the session, Rosa was mentally and physically exhausted, but exhilarated. For the first time, she truly believed she might be able to pull this off. As she gathered her things to leave, one of the violinists approached her. "That was impressive," the woman said kindly. "How long have you been playing?" Rosa hesitated, unsure how to answer. "Formally? About 2 months." The violinist's eyes widened. 2 months? That's impossible." "That's what I said," Rosa replied with a small smile. But Maestro Kaplan disagreed. The woman laughed. "He usually gets what he wants. I'm Lucia, by the way. Nice to meet you." "Lucia?" Rosa said, grateful for the friendly face among the intimidating professionals. "Some of us are going for coffee after tomorrow's rehearsal," Lucia said. "You should join us." As Rosa walked home that evening, a new feeling blossomed inside her, a sense of belonging. Perhaps she wasn't just an outsider anymore, a cleaning woman pretending to be a musician. Perhaps in some small way she was becoming what Kaplan had seen in her from the beginning. The transformation wasn't just in her hands or her playing. It was in how she saw herself. 1 week before the festival, disaster struck. Rosa had been pushing herself harder than ever. The final rehearsals with the orchestra were demanding, and Kaplan had increased their practice sessions to 4 hours daily. At night, she still performed her cleaning duties, often working until the early morning hours. She had lost weight and dark circles had formed under her eyes. That morning, her mother had looked at her with concern as she hurried to leave for Bellas Artes. "You're working too hard, Mija," she said, placing a gentle hand on Rosa's thin wrist. "You're not eating, you barely sleep. This promotion, is it worth your health?" Rosa had forced a smile. "It's just for a little while longer, Mama. After next week, things will go back to normal." She had kissed her mother's cheek and rushed out the door, ignoring the worry in the older woman's eyes. Now, as she sat at the grand piano on stage, Rosa could feel the exhaustion weighing on her like a heavy blanket. The orchestra was running through the full program for the festival, with Gabriel performing his concerto first, followed by what would be Rosa's surprise solo. Kaplan stood at the podium, conducting with his usual intensity. As Gabriel played the final notes of his piece, the maestro nodded with satisfaction. "Good, Ochoa. Now, let's continue with Rosa's piece." Gabriel rose from the piano bench with a slight bow to the orchestra. As he passed Rosa, he murmured, "Try not to embarrass yourself." Rosa took her place at the piano, adjusting the bench and taking a deep breath. The sheet music before her seemed to swim, the notes blurring together. She blinked hard, trying to focus. Kaplan raised his baton and the orchestra began the introduction to her piece. Rosa came in on cue, her fingers finding the familiar patterns on the keys. But something felt off. Her hands seemed disconnected from her mind, as if they belonged to someone else. Halfway through the first movement, she hit a wrong chord, then another. She could see Kaplan frowning from the corner of her eye, but he didn't stop the orchestra. Rosa pushed on, fighting against the growing fog in her head. Then came the passage she had practiced hundreds of times, the difficult transition that had once given her so much trouble. Her fingers stumbled, hitting a jarring combination of notes that clashed with the orchestra's harmonies. Kaplan's baton came down sharply. "Stop, stop," he called to the orchestra. He turned to Rosa, his expression a mixture of frustration and concern. "What's happening?" We perfected that passage weeks ago. I'm sorry, Rosa said, her voice barely audible. I just need a moment. We don't have moments to spare, Kaplan replied. The festival is in 6 days. From the beginning of the movement, he raised his baton again. The orchestra readied their instruments. Rosa placed her hands on the keys, willing them to cooperate. The introduction began again, and she came in on her cue. This time, she made it further before the mistakes began. Her vision was tunneling, the edges darkening. She could hear her heartbeat too fast, too loud. The keys beneath her fingers seemed to shift and move. And then, nothing. Rosa opened her eyes to find herself lying on the floor beside the piano bench. Concerned faces peered down at her. Lucia, the violinist, the concertmaster, a stagehand, and Kaplan, his usual stern expression replaced with alarm. What happened? Rosa asked, trying to sit up. A wave of dizziness forced her back down. You fainted, Lucia explained, her hand supporting Rosa's head, right in the middle of playing. Someone get her some water, Kaplan ordered. A cellist hurried off stage. With Lucia's help, Rosa managed to sit up slowly. Embarrassment washed over her as she realized the entire orchestra had witnessed her collapse. I'm fine, she insisted, though the room still spun slightly. I can continue. Absolutely not, Kaplan said firmly. Rehearsal is over for today. He turned to the orchestra. Everyone will resume tomorrow at the same time. The musicians began to pack up their instruments, many casting concerned glances toward Rosa. Gabriel lingered at the edge of the stage, his expression unreadable. Before finally turning and walking away, the cellist returned with a glass of water, which Rosa sipped gratefully. As the last of the orchestra members filed out, Kaplan crouched beside her. When was the last time you ate? He asked quietly. Rosa thought for a moment. Breakfast, I think. Just some coffee and a piece of bread. And sleep. How much did you get last night? She looked away. 3 hours, maybe 4. Kaplan sighed deeply. This is my fault. I've been pushing you too hard. No, Rosa protested. I want this. I can do it, not like this, Kaplan said, shaking his head. No performance is worth destroying your health. He stood up, his decision made. You're going home to rest. No practice today or tomorrow. Eat, sleep, recover your strength. But the festival will still happen, Kaplan finished for her. And you'll either be ready or you won't. But killing yourself with exhaustion won't help either way. Rosa felt tears threatening. After all this work, all this sacrifice, to fail now because her body betrayed her seemed unbearably cruel. What if I can't do it? She whispered, giving voice to the fear that had haunted her from the beginning. Kaplan looked at her for a long moment. Then we'll know we tried, he said simply. But I still believe you can. Now go home. Lucia helped Rosa gather her things and walked her to the bus stop. The maestro is right, she said gently. You need rest. We all hit our limits sometimes. Rosa nodded, too tired to argue. On the bus ride home, she leaned her head against the window, watching the city blur past. What would she tell her family? They still knew nothing about her training, about the performance at the festival. How could she explain coming home in the middle of the day, looking like she'd been through a war? When she reached her stop, Rosa trudged slowly to the apartment building, her feet heavy with fatigue and disappointment. She could hear her mother's voice as she approached their door, singing softly as she often did while cooking. Rosa stood outside for a moment, gathering her courage. Then she turned and walked away. She couldn't face her family yet, couldn't bear to see the concern in their eyes, couldn't find the words to explain what had happened or what hadn't happened. Instead, she found herself in a small park a few blocks from home. She sat on a bench beneath a flowering jacaranda tree, its purple blossoms occasionally drifting down around her. For the first time in weeks, she had nowhere to be, nothing to practice, no floors to clean. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. She hadn't realized how tightly wound she had been until that tension began to release. Rosa closed her eyes and simply breathed, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. Hours passed. The afternoon light softened into evening. Rosa watched children playing, couples walking hand in hand, old men playing chess. Normal life, the kind she had barely experienced these past 3 months. As darkness fell, she finally stood up and walked home. Her mother met her at the door, worry etched on her face. Where have you been? Your boss called, said you were sick. I'm just tired, Mama, Rosa said. It wasn't a lie. Her mother studied her face, then nodded. Sit, I'll heat up some soup. That night, Rosa slept for 12 hours straight. She woke feeling more like herself than she had in weeks. After a proper breakfast, her mother insisting she eat seconds, Rosa faced a decision. Should she go to Bellas Artes despite Kaplan's orders to rest? Or should she take another day to recover? The answer came unexpectedly from her youngest brother, who was drawing at the kitchen table. "What are you making?" Rosa asked, peering over his shoulder. "It's you," he said proudly, pointing to a stick figure with what looked like a box in front of it. "What am I doing?" "Playing the piano," he said, as if it were obvious. "Like at work." Rosa froze. "What do you mean?" Her brother looked up, his innocent eyes wide. "Miguel from next door said he saw you playing a big piano at the concert place. He went there on a school trip." Rosa's heart pounded. Miguel's mother cleaned houses in the wealthy neighborhoods just like her own mother. If Miguel had told his mother what he'd seen— "Does Mama know about this?" she asked quietly. Her brother shook his head. "It's a surprise, right? For when you play at the big show next week." Rosa felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you know about that?" "I heard you practicing," he said simply. "You play the same song over and over in your sleep. You move your fingers like this." He demonstrated, his small hands mimicking piano playing. Rosa didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Her secret wasn't much of a secret after all. That afternoon, despite Kaplan's instructions, Rosa returned to Bellas Artes. She didn't go to the rehearsal room or the stage, but instead climbed the stairs to Kaplan's office. She knocked on the door. "Come in," his voice called. Kaplan looked up in surprise when he saw her. "I thought I told you to rest." "I did," Rosa said, taking a seat across from him. "And I needed to. But I also needed to talk to you." Kaplan set down his pencil, giving her his full attention. "I want to perform at the festival," Rosa said firmly. "But not as a secret, not as a surprise. I want my family to be there. I want them to know what I've been doing these past months." Kaplan's eyebrows rose. "You haven't told them?" "I was afraid," Rosa admitted. "Afraid of getting their hopes up. Afraid of disappointing them if I failed. Afraid they wouldn't understand why I was doing this when we need money so badly. And now I'm more afraid of not trying at all," Rosa said. "If I fail, at least I'll fail honestly with the people I love supporting me." Kaplan studied her for a long moment. Then he did something Rosa had never seen before. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually stern face. "I think," he said slowly, "that is the wisest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time." That evening, Rosa sat her family down in their small living room and told them everything. About Kaplan discovering her playing the piano, about the lessons, about the upcoming performance at the festival. As she spoke, she watched their expressions change from confusion to disbelief to pride. "Why didn't you tell us?" her father asked when she had finished. "I was scared," Rosa admitted. "I didn't want to disappoint you if I couldn't do it." Her mother took her hands, examining the calluses that had formed on her fingers. "Mija, we could never be disappointed in you for trying something so brave. So you're not angry?" "We're proud," her father said firmly. "And we will be there at this festival to see you play." For the first time since her training began, Rosa felt truly at peace. Whatever happened at the festival, success or failure, she would face it with honesty and with her family by her side. The day of the International Music Festival arrived with perfect blue skies over Mexico City. Banners hung from lampposts throughout the cultural district, and a steady stream of well-dressed patrons flowed into Bellas Artes. Rosa watched them from backstage, her stomach in knots. "They look so fancy," she whispered to Lucia, who was adjusting her violin strings nearby. "Don't think about them," Lucia advised. "They're just people who love music. Like you." Rosa smoothed down the front of her dress, a simple black gown that Kaplan had arranged for her. It was the most elegant thing she had ever worn, though still modest compared to what the professional musicians were wearing. Her mother had spent an hour that morning braiding Rosa's hair into an intricate pattern that framed her face beautifully. The backstage area buzzed with activity. Musicians warmed up, stagehands adjusted lighting, and administrative staff rushed about with clipboards and headsets. Amid the chaos, Rosa spotted Gabriel in his tuxedo, surrounded by admirers. He had been civil to her in the final rehearsals, but still distant. 10 minutes to places," called the stage manager. Rosa felt a light touch on her shoulder and turned to find Kaplan behind her. dressed in his formal conductor's attire. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrified," Rosa admitted. Kaplan nodded. "Good. Fear sharpens the senses. Use it. Channel it into your playing. What if I freeze? What if I forget the music?" "You won't," Kaplan said with surprising gentleness. "The music is part of you now. Trust your hands. They know what to do." Rosa took a deep breath. "My family's out there. In the front row," Kaplan confirmed. "I arranged special seats for them." Rosa looked at him in surprise. Kaplan had changed over these past weeks. The harsh taskmaster was still there, but underneath she had discovered a man who truly cared, not just about music, but about the people who made it. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." A flicker of emotion crossed Kaplan's face before his usual stern expression returned. "Save your thanks for after the performance. Now go find a quiet corner and center yourself." Rosa found an empty practice room and sat at the piano, not playing, just resting her fingers lightly on the keys. She closed her eyes and thought about her journey, from the little girl who had fallen in love with music in her village school, to the cleaning woman who played in secret, to today. Whatever happened next, she had already come further than she had ever dreamed possible. A knock at the door broke her reverie. It was Lucia. "It's time," she said. Rosa followed her to the wings of the stage. The concert hall was packed, every seat filled. Through a gap in the curtain she could see her family in the front row, her parents in their Sunday best, her siblings wide-eyed with excitement. Her father caught her eye and gave her a small, proud nod. The house lights dimmed, and applause filled the hall as Kaplan strode onto the stage. He bowed to the audience, then turned to the orchestra. With a raise of his baton, the concert began. The first half of the program passed in a blur for Rosa. She watched from the wings as the orchestra performed beautifully, Kaplan conducting with his characteristic precision and passion. Then came the moment for Gabriel's concerto. He walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, bowed deeply, and took his place at the piano. As the orchestra began the introduction, Rosa watched his confident posture, his easy grace at the instrument. He played flawlessly, his technique impeccable, each note exactly as written. Yet something was missing. Rosa could hear it, and from Kaplan's slight frown she could tell he heard it too. Gabriel's playing was perfect but mechanical, lacking the emotional depth that made music truly move people. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. Gabriel bowed multiple times, basking in the adoration, before finally leaving the stage. As he passed Rosa in the wings, he paused. "Good luck," he said, surprising her. "You'll need it." Before Rosa could respond, Kaplan was addressing the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special addition to our program tonight." His voice carried throughout the hall without a microphone. 3 months ago, I discovered an extraordinary talent here at Bellas Artes. Not among our professional musicians, but in our cleaning staff. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. Rosa Mendez has worked tirelessly to prepare for tonight. She will now perform her own interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, with a special cadenza that we have developed together. Please welcome her to the stage. Rosa's legs felt like lead as she walked out into the blinding lights. The applause was polite but curious. Who was this unknown woman? Why was she being given this opportunity on such a prestigious stage? She could see her family clearly now. Her mother had tears in her eyes. Her youngest brother was bouncing in his seat with excitement. Her father sat tall, his face glowing with pride. Rosa took her place at the piano, adjusted the bench, and placed her hands in her lap. She looked to Kaplan, who gave her the smallest of nods. Then he raised his baton and the orchestra began. The familiar introduction washed over her, the strings creating a somber, expectant mood. Rosa counted the measures silently, waiting for her entrance. When it came, her fingers found the keys with certainty, producing the rich, melancholy chords that opened her part. As she played, Rosa forgot about the audience, forgot about her nervousness. There was only the music, the conversation between her piano and the orchestra, the story they were telling together. The first movement flowed into the second. Rosa's confidence grew with each passing minute. She had played this piece hundreds of times now, but never had it felt so alive under her fingers. She could feel Kaplan's energy from the podium, guiding the orchestra, supporting her playing. the two of them connected by invisible threads of music. And then came the moment they had planned, the transition to her solo cadenza. Kaplan gave a subtle signal to the orchestra, and they began to fade out, one section at a time, until only Rosa's piano remained. For 6 minutes, she would play alone, a special arrangement Kaplan had created to showcase her unique style. It incorporated elements of Rachmaninoff's original work, but allowed Rosa to add her own voice, her own story. As the last orchestral notes faded away, a hush fell over the concert hall. Rosa took a deep breath and began her solo. She played the first theme slowly, thoughtfully, as Kaplan had taught her. But then something unexpected happened. As her fingers moved across the keys, Rosa found herself deviating from what they had practiced. A new melody emerged, something that had been growing inside her these past months. A melody that spoke of her village, of her family's struggles, of her dreams. From the corner of her eye, she could see Kaplan's startled expression, quickly replaced by something like wonder. She continued, weaving this new theme with Rachmaninoff's, creating a tapestry of sound that filled the hall. Rosa lost all sense of time. She was no longer playing for the audience or for Kaplan or even for her family. She was playing for herself, telling her story through the piano, pouring everything she had learned, everything she had felt, into the music. When she finally returned to the main theme, signaling the orchestra to join her for the finale, she was surprised to find tears streaming down her face. She hadn't realized she was crying. The orchestra came in perfectly, building to the triumphant conclusion. Rosa's hands danced across the keys with newfound freedom, each note ringing true and clear. As she played the final chords, she felt a sense of completion, of having said exactly what she needed to say. The last note hung in the air for a moment. Then silence. Rosa sat still, her hands resting on the keys, afraid to look up. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had her improvisation ruined everything? 3 heartbeats passed in complete silence. And then it came, a roar of applause unlike anything Rosa had ever heard. She raised her head to see the entire audience on their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping away tears. Kaplan extended his hand to her, signaling her to stand. As she rose from the bench, the applause grew even louder. She looked to the front row where her family stood beaming, her mother openly weeping with joy. Lucia and the other musicians were applauding too, many stomping their feet in appreciation, a rare honor from fellow performers. Even Gabriel, standing at the edge of the stage, was clapping, a look of genuine respect on his face. Rosa bowed deeply, overwhelmed by the response. Kaplan directed her to bow again and again, as the applause continued unabated. Finally, he gestured for the orchestra to stand and share in the recognition. As the applause finally began to subside, Kaplan leaned close to Rosa and whispered, "What happened to our rehearsed cadenza?" "I'm sorry," she whispered back. "I don't know what came over me." A rare smile crossed his face. "Don't apologize. That was what I've been waiting for." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. There were interviews with music critics, congratulations from distinguished guests, and endless photographs. Rosa's family was brought backstage, where her father embraced her with tears in his eyes. "I have never been so proud," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Later, as the crowds thinned and the musicians packed up their instruments, Kaplan found Rosa sitting quietly at the piano, gently touching the keys that had changed her life. "What happens now?" she asked him. Kaplan sat beside her on the bench. "That depends on you. There will be offers, scholarships, training opportunities. Your performance tonight will open doors, and if I want to keep cleaning floors," Kaplan studied her for a moment, "then you would be wasting an extraordinary gift, but it would be your choice to make." Rosa nodded, considering his words. "I think," she said slowly, "that I'd like to learn more, to see how far this gift can take me." "It can take you as far as you're willing to go," Kaplan said. "But remember what made your playing special tonight. It wasn't just technique or practice. It was your story, where you come from, what you've overcome. Never lose that, no matter how many fancy concert halls you play in." Rosa looked out at the empty auditorium, imagining it full again, waiting for her music. "I won't," she promised. 2 years later, a poster hung in the lobby of Bellas Artes announcing a special concert. It featured a photograph of Rosa Mendez, now a student at the National Conservatory of Music, returning to perform where her journey had begun. And below her name, in smaller letters, former custodian, discovered by Maestro Victor Kaplan, but to the cleaning staff who gathered to hear her play, she was simply Rosa, one of their own who had found her voice and, in doing so, had stopped the music long enough for everyone to listen.